Good afternoon. I'm Carolyn Rye, School Board Chair. This workshop of the School Board of the City of Virginia Beach is hereby convened at 4:00 p.m. on this 27th day of April 2021. Pursuant to the state of emergency related to this COVID-19 pandemic, the Governor's executive orders, the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, as amended by the Virginia General Assembly, and the School Board's April 7th, 2020 emergency resolution, this workshop of the School Board of the City of Virginia Beach will be conducted in person for school board members and certain staff members. However, due to the necessary health mitigation strategies in place, it is impractical and unfeasible for the public to attend this meeting in person. Members of the public will be able to observe the school board meeting through live streaming at vbschools.com, broadcast on VBTV Channel 47, and on Zoom. It's the school board's protocol to break at 5:30 to prepare for the regular school board meeting to begin at 6 o'clock. At 5:30, the board will conclude its informal meeting unless members vote to continue the informal meeting until 5:45. The informal session will conclude no later than that time to allow the school board and the school administration to prepare for the regular school board meeting at 6 o'clock p.m. With that, Madam Clerk, will you please announce those school board members in attendance?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In school board chambers is Chairwoman Rye, Ms. Melnick, Ms. Felton, Ms. Franklin, Ms. Hughes, Ms. Owens, Ms. Riggs, Ms. Weems, and attending via Zoom is Ms. Holtz and Ms. Manning.
Thank you. For the record, Ms. Holtz is...
Ms. Holtz is here.
Okay, so for the record, Ms. Holtz is attending via Zoom in the building, and Mrs. Manning, for health reasons, is not here. And did you mention Mrs. Anderson?
Ms. Anderson is not on Zoom yet.
Okay, thank you. Well, so school board admin matters and reports. We'll just cover any of those first before we welcome our guests who are awaiting their introduction. I'm waiting for my other glasses. Who had a hand up? Mrs. Hughes.
I just wanted to ask that we have something added to the agenda, whether it's open or closed session. It might be more appropriate to start with a closed session regarding the Jericho Road property. It's something that the civic leagues in that area are concerned about, since with the new construction, Bayside 6 will be moving out of there. So it's just something we need to have on our radar.
So we can... Mrs. Linetti.
I think we can do that, but Ms. Linetti, I'm not sure it's timely for today. I mean, we've got some time. This is a property that won't be...
and I wasn't saying necessarily
Yes, ma'am, I
today. I
understand.
just meant in the not too distant future.
Yeah, I heard Ms. Linetti suggesting today, but I don't think it's timely for today.
We have a closed session anyway. I can give you an update on some of it in closed session, but there's no action being recommended at this time period. So if Ms. Hughes wants that, we have a closed session scheduled for afterwards, and we could add it to the call for just a discussion on the status, but there is no pending action at the moment.
Okay. We'll defer that until the formal meeting to make that determination, or... Okay. I just wanted to bring up again the presentation to City Council, the school board budget presentation. Dr. Spence and myself presented, as well as Mr. Arnold, Mr. Hunziker, Mr. Freeman was there joining us, Mrs. Melnick, and a reminder that that informal session is recorded for viewing and for any of our colleagues who still haven't had the chance, and the public as well, vbgov.com. And it's the City Council informal session from last Tuesday, and I believe it started at noon and we began at about the 17-minute mark, if I'm not mistaken. So, okay, anybody else? All right, then with that, let's go right into our School Resource Officer Program update. We welcome Chief of Operations, Mr. Jack Freeman, who will be introducing our other guests. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman, Madam Vice Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Spence. I think I've got a presentation that's going to come up on the slide here in just a second. Mr. DeMartini recently provided you an update regarding our school resource officers. We're back today to share information regarding the Virginia Beach City Public Schools and Virginia Beach Police Department Memorandum of Understanding and to address recent staffing adjustments. Let's start with the MOU update. Legislation was passed in 2019, requires school divisions to update SRO MOUs every 2 years, provide notice and opportunity for public comment for each review period, and to conspicuously publish the signed MOU on the school division website. Our current MOU was signed in February 2008, and we have a draft MOU that is ready for public comment. This is a substantial update that is roughly double in length to the current MOU, and there's an emphasis on promoting a positive and supportive school environment, and that we intend to use measurable objectives, data associated with school discipline, crime, violence, and school climate to inform our progress. Roles and responsibilities are expanded upon and account for roughly half of the document. The language provides programmatic and communications expectations for Virginia Beach Police Department and Virginia Beach City Public School leadership. It also outlines expectations for SROs as law enforcement officers, law-related educators, informal mentors, and role models. Someone who is fully integrated with the school staff and develops trusting, supportive relationships in the school and community. There is language in the current MOU and the draft update that enables reassignment of SROs due to unusual incidents, circumstances, or other police department operational needs. Given current police officer manning levels and recent events, the Virginia Beach Police Department made the difficult decision to reassign 10 SROs. We have a strong partnership with Virginia Beach Police Department, and our leadership teams have met several times to coordinate resources to maximize the safety and security of our schools. Chief Newdigate is with us tonight to share some insights with you. And before I invite him to the podium, please bear with me while I share a cautionary note. I realize that you all know and understand what I am about to say, but it's useful for the viewing public to hear and understand the following. During the question and answer portion of the update, it is our collective intent to appropriately answer questions. However, we will keep our responses at a high level. Greater detail that is shared publicly about the status of security in schools equates to greater risk. This is not unique to Virginia Beach City Public Schools. Organizations with varying missions and functions limit the public sharing of security-related information in order to best protect their organizations. It is important to minimize security-related information that is publicly shared to avoid giving an advantage to somebody who intends to do harm. So thank you for letting me get that out in the open. And with that, I would like to introduce our Chief of Police, Chief Paul Newdigate.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome, sir.
Welcome. Thank you to the board, and thank you for this opportunity to speak this afternoon. I think first and foremost, we would just like to start, and actually with me I've got Deputy Chief Sean Adams, Captain Wilkerson, and Lieutenant Wessler. And we just want to take the opportunity to reaffirm our commitment to the schools and the SRO program. You know, we find ourselves in a delicate situation. I think our vision, the vision short term, is that we move forward with a full complement of SROs in our middle and high schools. The long-term vision is, in addition to what we provide with our school resource officers and the relationship that we form with the students, that once we get to the point that we stabilize our staffing and we can think about increasing the complement, I made it clear to the City Council that taking a holistic look at the PD, our authorized complement is 813. We're 112 vacancies short currently, but we actually should be closer to probably 900 officers for the level of service that the citizens of Virginia Beach expect from us. And if we can stabilize our numbers and increase our complement, my long-term vision is to implement a youth services unit that would actually take up where the school resource officers leave off and make sure that we do not lose our young ones during the summer months, to really form those relationships and build on them. So for the summer months when they lose the structure that the schools provide, that we continue to build upon that. So short-term vision, long-term vision is to truly expand our engagement with our students and our youth. But the reality is like I mentioned, we are 112 positions short. That is almost 14% of my authorized strength. On top of that, there was it's national, and Virginia Beach is mirroring the national trend that there was a 32% increase in homicidal violence across the nation last year. Just year to date, we have a 61% increase in shooting violence in Virginia Beach compared to the same time period last year. And when you look at that over the 3-year average, it's even more daunting. It's 112%. Knowing that a large portion of that, and going where the data tells us, because I do believe in being an evidence-based, data-driven agency, a large portion of that shooting violence is unfortunately occurring at our ocean front. So we had to take some not easily decided steps to augment the staffing to address the precipitous increase in shooting violence that we're seeing in the beach. So knowing that we're 112 positions short, I have vacancies in a lot of critical assignments, such as homicide, our traffic safety, our warrant fugitive. So we've cut in a lot of places while trying not to touch the school resource officers, because we realize how valuable they are to the schools, to the community, to our students. But unfortunately, at the rate that we are attriting out, it became incumbent, and I had to make a hard decision to pull 10 SROs. I think some of the good news is we've worked hand in hand with Safe Schools to try to mitigate some of the concern that will cause. We are not graduating, but our current recruits that are now partnered with their training officer graduate to single patrol status here in just a couple weeks. So we will use that opportunity when they graduate to solo patrol status to replace 2 of the SROs back into the high schools in short order. I think moving forward, we continue in constant communication and dialogue with the superintendent, his staff, the board. I would love to stand in front of this board and tell you that this will never occur again and that we will always have a full complement of officers. But the reality is I cannot tell you that. I cannot look at each and every one of you and tell you that we will not find ourselves in this situation again next school year. Because law enforcement right now, it's not just Virginia Beach. It is law enforcement as a profession that we are struggling with recruiting, and we are struggling with a high level of officers that are leaving this profession earlier than anticipated. 112 officers is probably going to take us several years to recover, to get back to the 813 that we need to just to maintain, and then move us beyond that to the 900 plus that I would like to see us get to, because I would really like to implement the youth services unit. I would like to expand our community engagement efforts. Those are the long-term visions, but the reality is we're in difficult straits right now. So I think what I'm asking the board and looking at the doctor and his team is we really have to start thinking about what Plan B is and what Plan B looks like as we move forward. I submit the questions.
Mrs. Felton.
Chief Nunegate, thank you for coming. I do appreciate you taking the time to come down to speak with us. And Mr. Freeman, thank you for that precautionary measurement to be polite and to speak very politely to the officers. Chief Nunegate, I I understand your situation of 112 vacancies, and I do take in consideration you having to not only take care of the school but the community as well. But as a school board member, this is sort of a tender spot with me as well. And some of your officers that you have in an audience, I work with them, all of them closely in the community and either other events. But after speaking with some of your officers concerning them being pulled out of the schools and not having that one-on-one with the students, what my concern is with this happening is the trust, the community engagement, the students' camaraderie with the SROs. If you know, if no one else know, also seen that they will know that they build strong bonds, and it's just not an officer there with them. Is more of a family type of situation. In August of 2020, I met with several students. I also met with a couple of officers who were there. Well, talking about this same topic about how important the SROs are in the schools and what it meant for those SROs to have that relationship with the students, because it was more than just coming to school and seeing an officer there. And we were trying to get that one-on-one relationship to be advanced there. My concern too is what happens in the community, it spills over into the schools. And we've had a lot of incidents just this past month that, and then you probably can't speak to it, maybe school-age kids involved. And now that you pull the officers out, the SRO out, then those have been, how are we going to measure, how are we going to make sure that camaraderie is there and that we keep this conversation over for them to speak to SROs of things that's happening? Because when they become familiar with the SRO, they're more apt to speak and talk about those things and lead into how we can prevent these. But I am concerned about that trust being broken. I am concerned. So how are we going to move forward? How are we going to make sure that that component, the trust, the camaraderie with the students, the school environment, how are we going to make sure that that happens? Because my understanding from some of the officers, they are concerned that they're being pulled out and that they will still have to go to the school maybe for other instances. But I'm concerned about those things, trust, camaraderie. How are we going to keep those things on board with SROs and the students?
Thank you, ma'am. And we're very concerned about that as well. And I think, as I mentioned, that's why we have cut in a lot of places. And it wasn't until we feel that we've really reached critical mass that we realized that we were going to have to delve into our SRO complement to just keep up some basic functions that we have to provide. If things continue at the attrition rate that we're at, I may be forced to start downsizing or completely abolishing some of the preferred assignments that we have. And I don't think any of us want to be without a traffic safety unit. We don't want to be without a fatal crash team. There's a lot of things out there. Our child exploitation computer crimes unit, unfortunately, there is a lot of, come to find out, there is a lot of individuals engaging in child porn that may be on the chopping block as we continue to move, because we are struggling. So we're very concerned about the camaraderie. I know what those relationships are, and I applaud the school, and I applaud the board, and I applaud this community. Because when I left Cincinnati, we have a very established SRO program. Those officers up there live and breathe those students just like we do in Virginia Beach, but the community conversation was wanting to pull those officers out of the schools. And I know how valuable they are. So to come down here and find out how valued they are by the board and the community gives me great hope. I understand your concern. It's just right now we're finding ways to try to just provide basic services, and we're very cognizant. I think that's part of what that Plan B that I speak of, what that looks like in this current capacity. I'm not sure that any of us know, but we have to find a way to implement a Plan B so that we don't lose the trust of the students and the youth with our officers, because you hit it right there. It not only occurs in the school, but when our officers encounter them outside, we absolutely have to have that trust. And COVID has put us behind the 8 ball in regards to community engagement efforts. We do not want to lose the relationships that we have in the schools, and that's why the long-term vision is for the wraparound and the true youth services unit. Historically, our SROs have been repurposed into the districts and down to the oceanfront every year for the seasonal increase staffing. Long-term, the vision is that that doesn't happen, that we have enough officers that they can engage, mentor, and provide the structure for our youth in a year-round capacity.
Just for the interest of the public that's hearing me, I just want to let them know too that the SROs, when they're in the school, they're not just policing. They actually create that atmosphere of camaraderie. And I just want to let them know that it's more than just a police officer standing in the building looking like an officer, but they actually interact with the students, making sure that they do feel safe in the building and that they do have a friend on the outside of the school as well. Thank you, Chief Newt. Again, I appreciate your coming and I appreciate you explaining that.
And I appreciate your comments right there, because I think the board and all the administration know that policing is just a very small portion of what they do. 98% of it is building those relationships and caring about our students. And that's what the community needs to know, that that's really what their function is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Weems, and then Mrs. Manning.
Yes, thank you, Chief, for joining us this afternoon. And I, like Mrs. Felton, and I'm sure all of us, we're just kind of in charge of schools. You're in charge of the whole city, but we kind of look at the students first because that's, where we're sitting. And so it is of great concern to me. And I also know that, without that level of protection, but as important, just the go-to person for so many of our students. My 5 children graduated, and they would be able to tell me about their SRO more than they would be able to tell me about many people in that building, many administrators, because most of the time the students only see their their school counselor or their administrator, not very often, but they would see that SRO on a daily basis. I was at an athletic event just last week, and I met one of your SROs, and he was just wonderful. I mean, he was just so excited to be there. And just watching as the kids were leaving that athletic event, how he interacted with them, that they knew his name, and, he was joking with them. But so we all know that it's important. So I love the long-term vision that you have as far as summer and some other things. But I guess now our plan B, what is the plan B, and can you say when you think that these SROs are going to be able to get back into the school? I think we were given some sort of estimate date. And then the plan B, have we exhausted all of our retired police officers? Have we exhausted, private security? It wouldn't be the same, and maybe that's a Jack Freeman question too, because we need a plan B, and we need it sooner than later, obviously.
And I'll turn it over to Jack, but I think those are some of the initial conversations that we've had, is how do we augment and how do we supplement to make sure that we're not leaving critical gaps in coverage. And I don't know that we have an exact answer today, but what we pledge is to continue to work together to find out what that plan B looks like.
Well, and along those lines, so if you refer to it as a plan B, we do have a plan B, which is a rotation of the SROs to be able to cover for the remainder of the year. So I think so there was a comment about, and please fill me in to make sure that I get it right, about security officer.
Well, just if part of your plan B was to maybe look elsewhere besides police officers, to look elsewhere. I mean, I don't know. I don't have the answer. This is not my level of expertise, but different security, private security companies. I mean, I'm just throwing some suggestions out that I've heard from the community.
Right.
Just get somebody in there, because now you're talking about the end of the year, so now we're looking at for the fall. So I was hoping that we would have something tonight that could assure us that the gap would be filled.
So, yes, ma'am. So to assure you that the gap is filled, we have a rotation of our
Okay.
SROs to cover all of our schools.
Okay.
So we're just doing it with fewer SROs. To answer your specific question regarding security, so you heard in my comments, you heard some of the comments from Ms. Felton, some of the comments from Chief Newdigate, that an SRO isn't just about having a armed person in the
Right,
building
correct.
that's responsible for that. There's so much more that goes into it. We have not, and this kind of references back to I won't go into all the detail that Mr. DeMartini did when we last talked, but there's a lot of training that goes into being an SRO. There's not any police officer that's assigned to be an SRO. It is a process to select the right people, and they get specialized training to be an SRO. Because as we've all seen this, the importance isn't the force, it's the de-escalation. It's the relationships, it's the trust. That doesn't come with hiring an outside agency. So
Well, yeah,
that's
true.
not
I
the-
was just, and I wasn't saying that it was going to take the place, but I would think that someone there is better than nobody there. So, but you've said that we are on a rotating schedule. So, and I wasn't sure of that before tonight. Yeah, in no way am I saying that it would be as good or take the place, because we knew it wouldn't be. But I was just wondering if we're having nobody there, if that would help. So I'm glad to hear that we're rotating them.
So, and two final points on that. So number one, I want to be specific that I'm only talking about to the course of the end of the year.
Right.
And then we'll see moving forward, and we want to make sure that we're in good partnership and we have all the right people at the table as we're making decisions moving forward. The other piece that I also mentioned is also remember, without going into too much detail, if you look at the geographics of the city, while there may not be somebody at a specific school at a specific time of day, there's a school right adjacent to it, which is not very far away. So the plan that we've developed is to ensure that our response time is rapid.
That's good.
And just to add one additional piece of clarification, because I'm just based on the conversation, I want to make sure we don't confuse the community. We do have security officers in every building, in addition to our school resource officers. So we have school resource officers plus a security team in each of our buildings. And so, those are the folks, when you come to the door, they're the ones who are letting you in. They're the ones who are making sure that we're checking folks in and out. And in most cases, we have multiple security officers in each of our buildings, in addition to the school resource officers that are there as well. So just want to, when you say there isn't anybody there, I want to make sure that that's
Right.
not the case.
True. I'm sorry. Yeah. Thank you for that clarification. Definitely.
Yes, ma'am.
And those folks are so important and welcoming as well. So, okay, well, thank you, and I look forward to, hopefully we can be back on par in the fall, and definitely looking forward to the, long-term expansion of the SRO program, Chief. Thank you so much.
All right, Mrs. Manning and then Mrs. Melnick.
Thank you, Chief, for being here, and we're very thankful for our SRO program. We have only there to police, they're there to create relationships, and I've seen those firsthand, and we probably have some of the best SROs in the country, in my opinion. About a year ago, new legislation was passed that allows retired officers to come back and serve as SROs. I've been asking this question of administration for the last couple of months, and I was just wondering where we are with that. How have we identified retired officers, potentially even retired SROs, who can come back and fill some of these positions? And then as well, to Ms. Weems' point, I understand that we have security assistants in the buildings, but they are not armed. So have we looked at having armed security, filling gaps where needed until we do get some of these issues resolved?
Yes, ma'am. So regarding the legislation, so just to be clear, what the legislation allows is that retired police officers, after having received 12 months of retirement benefits, can then be hired back full-time. If they come back and work in any temporary assignment, that interrupts the 12 months process. So I'll turn it over to Chief Newdigate to be able to talk about that. But there is a dynamic here that's kind of inferred in the question, or implied in the question of, we already have a police department that's struggling with their manning, but can they come over, retire, and come work for the schools? So there's a balance that we're going to have to work here as we work to solve this challenge in so many different ways. As it relates to security assistance, for the remainder of this year, we're not looking to add any hired armed professional because we're working a rotation to resolve that challenge. And then moving forward, we'll continue to work with the police department on what the best mitigation is at that point. Chief, I'll turn it over to you.
Absolutely. And I appreciate the question, and I think we're at the point with, we just don't have a whole lot of answers. You know, what I can tell you from the time that I've been here, and since I've been here, we've probably had close to 50 plus retirements. We're doing very thorough exit interviews. These folks that are going out the door right now are not interested in policing in any type of capacity, unfortunately. So hopefully that will change. Maybe some time and circumstances across the country will soften that desire to wean themselves from law enforcement in any capacity. But right now, I think we would be hard pressed to find retired officers that want to come back and engage in a law enforcement capacity. You know, I'm hopeful that things will change. I've seen it in 32 years of policing. Things are cyclical. I do feel that we're still on the upward climb of the bell curve, but things will change for us in the future, and we just need to find out and work together to stabilize and make sure that we don't have an interruption in the relationship building and the safety while law enforcement works through some of the issues that is occurring across the nation. And we're just a microcosm of what's occurring here in the beach, and it's, you know, please take my word that we're not the only ones struggling. You know, I know we're not as big as Baltimore, but I keep track of all the agencies. There's 500 officers short. Everyone is having the same problems. Some greater, some not as bad, but you know, we're doing a lot of things our end to try to increase our recruiting. There are some positive signs that we've actually had more people sign up and take our test year to date than we had all of last year. So some positive steps. We've restructured some of our recruiting initiatives, made them more virtual, digital, and social media based. COVID kind of drove us there, and right now it seems to be working in our favor. The only thing is, by the time we hire, we put them through the academy, they go into phase 2 it's a year before they really count to us as a solo body. So some positives, but we still have some struggles ahead of us collectively as a board, the police department, and the community.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm glad that at least you're looking at the retired numbers, even if I understand that they don't want to come back. I understand that situation. So thank you for keeping that in mind.
Yes, ma'am. I just add one more to that, just so that we're clear. And Ms. Manning, I'm not suggesting you're saying this, but just for the viewing public and everybody else that is on. So when we talk about retired police officers coming back and working for schools, they would not be in an SRO capacity. At that point, they're retired police officers. We have hired retired police officers to work as security assistants in our schools. So security assistants are the employees who are specifically assigned to the building, typically a school. We have security assistants that are assigned here. We also have, as you know, what we call security officers, and there are rotating officers. There's 2 of them on duty at any given time of the day, and they are a roving security opportunity. So, but just for clarity, when they do retire and they do meet that 12-month requirement of receiving their retired pay, if they were to come back, they could come back as a security assistant. They would not come back as an SRO.
So, Mr. Freeman, is that what the law states, or is that Virginia Beach school policy?
So SROs are uniformed police officers. So that's why they would not be coming back as a uniformed police officer.
It's my understanding that the law allows them to come back as a uniformed police officer.
Mr. Linetti, I will turn that over to you.
Ms. Manning, it's Cammie Linetti. I think you're confused. You may be confused in the fact that the police officers are not hired or working for you. They actually work for the city. So the city would have to hire them back and have a budget for that. As I think Chief has indicated to you, they're not interested in coming back. If we are, you do not currently pay for them, although I think the proposal is that you will be paying for one additional security SRO eventually at Renaissance Academy, but you don't pay for them. They work for the city. So if the city's not able to bring them back on because the chief has indicated that they're not interested in returning to work, we can't then have them in the role of a security, a school resource officer. There are two kinds of security assistants and security officers that the state allows. We would hire them, we would have to fund them, but they would not be licensed or officers working for us. You would have to get the city, you need to talk to city council about hiring individuals to serve in that capacity. I think that is how the budget would have to work to manage this.
Okay, but the law allows them to come back in the capacity of a police officer to work as an SRO.
Right, but not your employees. SROs belong to the police department. They work for the police department. You do not pay for them.
They've never been our employees.
Correct. So they would
the same role, but city council would have to fund it, basically.
Just telling you, while they've talked to some of these individuals that are retiring, they are not interested in returning to a uniform status. So you would need to talk with city council about a way to return them. You cannot bring them back in that capacity and have them working for schools. They have to work for the city to maintain that capacity.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just thinking for the future and just trying to get an overall perspective of what the legislation allows.
Take another look at that before we answer that question directly, because that isn't my understanding. My understanding was that the law addressed that those officers could come back as school security officers. So I think, Ms. Manning, if it's okay, we'll do a little research and get back to you.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you all for that. Mrs. Melnick, then Ms. Owens.
So I'm lucky enough to share my neighborhood with an elementary school, and I kind of have a Mrs. Kravitz view of that school. And the added benefit of seeing police cars patrol. And I think people would feel good knowing that those patrols will still continue and there will still be drive-bys or pull-ins and around the loops and
Yes, ma'am. In addition to the rotation that Mr. Freeman spoke, our officers, when they're not already engaged in other activity, have been asked and directed to provide those directed patrols to the schools. If they need to do a report, please pull into the school parking lot, do the report there instead of, behind a building somewhere, to please provide that additional visibility. So yes, that request has been made quite clear to our team.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, Ms. Owens, and then Mrs. Anderson.
Thank you. A couple comments for us as a board to be thinking about in regards to where we are right now with the SROs and what Plan B may bring for us in the future. I think that the obviously difficult decision that the chief made was absolutely the correct decision. We have a number of our students currently not in our school buildings right now, and they are in the communities, they're in their homes, they're in situations where we know are difficult and things are happening in their homes. And so if having fewer SROs in our buildings, which are generally safe buildings, we haven't had situations where we needed the armed strength of an officer to intervene. We needed officers to intervene at certain times, perhaps, but having the armed officers available to intervene in the neighborhoods where a number of our children are dealing with issues with domestic violence in their homes or other issues that are going on in their community, if having them outside of the school walls right now gives faster response times to those families in the community, I think that that's important. And I think it's actually a benefit to our community right now that our officers, our SRO officers who have that higher level of training and interaction skills and de-escalation skills are in the communities where we have these increases of issues right now with COVID. And so I think that that's, it's a difficulty with the staffing, but it's a positive overall for where a lot of our students are right now. But in terms of our Plan B, I think this is a good time for us as a district to be considering that if 90% of what is going on with our SROs is not direct policing, it's the relationship building, it's the mentorships and those things, that this is the time we need to be looking at strengthening those relationships with our security staff, with our counseling departments, with our other administrators, our coaches, and making sure that our counselors, coaches, and security assistants are able to maintain close relationships with our law enforcement so that students can see that that is a pathway, that is a relationship, that if they need to reach a SRO or talk to an officer and are feeling uncomfortable about it, that they can safely go to Coach Johnson because they've seen that relationship that Coach Johnson has with law enforcement, and that we're building those relationships and trust proactively. If we're saying that is one of the primary duties that we're seeing walking out of the door, that our Plan B is that we have proactive actions to build those relationships between those key staff members and law enforcement, and then back through our students. And so I think it's an opportunity that if we are prepared for, will give us some lasting results that we can continue to fall back on no matter what happens with the staffing situations as we move forward with law enforcement. So I think that's just something that we need to be proactive in thinking about.
Okay, we're coming close to winding this up. I think we have Mrs. Anderson, who I can announce has joined us and is zooming in from out of state due to a family matter. Please go ahead, Mrs. Anderson.
Thank you. If I'm asking a question that has already been asked, I apologize. I'm having trouble hearing some of the speakers. But so this is kind of for Chief Newdigate, if he's still there. I'd like to know if there is such thing as police officers reserve, similar to like the Navy Reserve, the Coast Guard Reserve, etc. Is there such thing as that? And if not, would that be something that you could possibly ask City Council then to fund, and then we could use police officer reserves who may want to retire, but may want to come back as just a reserve with specific duties, i.e. for to be an SRO within our schools, that type of duty.
The question, it is my understanding at one time we did have a pretty active reserve program that has now been discontinued. If we thought that there was some viability in that, it would be something that we would definitely pursue. But there's a lot of considerations. At this point, to put a reserve officer out there, they would have to have the same amount of training, the exact same equipment that a full-duty, regular capacity officer would. And so it's something that if there was interest and we thought that some of our retiring officers may wish to fill that role, but unfortunately right now that is not the place that we find ourselves. But like I mentioned to the board, we are doing very thorough active exit interviews to really gauge why folks are leaving us and what their future endeavors are going to be. And pretty much to a T, they're either leaving us for other police departments, and those that are leaving the profession early are doing exactly that. They are leaving the profession, and there is not a desire to continue to serve the public in a law enforcement capacity. But we'll continue to monitor, and it is something that we will definitely look at if we thought that there was an opportunity and a capability to stand that up.
Thank you. I appreciate you being here. And my hat's off to all the SROs out there, because in my opinion, they are doing a great job in our city and with our schools, and it is a valued resource. We appreciate it. Thank you.
So thank you, Chief, and your officers for all taking the time to be with us today. And I think I speak on behalf of not just my colleagues here, but our broader community of families. So thank you all for what you do each and every day.
Thank you to the chair of the board, superintendent, and I think you hit it right there, ma'am, that this was not a decision we made lightly because our SROs are top-notch. They live what they do, so it was a very hard decision to pull them to staff other critical functions, but they are a tremendous bunch of officers, and we're very, very pleased that we have them in our fold, so thank you.
Come back and see us sometime. All right, that brings us to our elementary literacy instruction overview and update. And we have with us today Miss Danielle Colucci and Miss Abigail Dougherty. Welcome, Miss Colucci.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairwoman Rye, Vice Chairman Melnick, school board members, Dr. Spence, and senior leadership. My name is Danielle Colucci, and I serve as the Executive Director of Elementary Teaching and Learning. I have the pleasure this evening to introduce you to Abigail Dougherty, our division's Elementary Language Arts Coordinator. In addition to serving as our elementary coordinator, Ms. Dougherty has also served as a reading specialist and assistant principal in our division. We are very fortunate to have her leadership in literacy instruction and meeting the needs of our learners, as she brings great expertise in instructional coaching, leadership, and the science of reading. Ms. Dougherty was selected by VDOE to serve as a local professional learning facilitator for Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling, also known as LETTERS, due to her outstanding performance in coursework. In addition, she was also recently named the Virginia State Reading Administrator of the Year for the entire state of Virginia and named this year's recipient of the James D. Mullins Leadership Award. Ms. Dougherty will provide an overview of our division's K-5 literacy instructional model as it relates to reading research and best practices. She will make connections to the teaching and learning framework and share how this will support us in responding to students' needs in the area of elementary literacy.
Hello and welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairwoman Rye, Vice Chairwoman Melnick, members of the board, and Dr. Spence. Teaching reading is rocket science. This quote from Dr. Louisa Moat's 2020 publication is striking because it marries the ultimate goal of inspiring the next generation with the resolve to leverage evidence-based instructional practices. So as the body of research known as the science of reading has become more widely available to educators, and while simultaneously national, state, and local reading data continues to indicate that we are not adequately meeting the needs of all students in the area of literacy, we began to make updates to our literacy model and our instructional practices. In addition, supporting the work of teaching and learning in a pandemic, we also acknowledge that changes to instruction that have occurred over the past 18 months have presented educators with various challenges as they work incredibly hard to meet the needs of their readers. We recognize that moving forward, some students will have gaps in literacy that we will continue to diligently work to close. Literacy and the implications of being a successful reader are of the utmost priority now more than ever. Because of the updates made over the past few years, and specifically for the 2020-2021 school year, we are prepared to do this in a way that is systematic, explicit, and aligned to how the brain learns to read. So I'm going to get a little sciencey here with you, but just for a little bit. So to provide some additional context regarding how the brain learns to read and write, it may be helpful to briefly review two of the theoretical models that drive our work. And I know that the term theoretical model may sound a little bit abstract, but I always remind stakeholders in professional learning that theory is also that gravity is also a theory, and very rarely do we test the implications of not following that. So we rely on these models to illustrate and capture research and processes in a way that's more user-friendly, and it really supports our implementation. So humans are born to speak, and most do so naturally without any need for intervention or direct teaching or instruction.
This is not the case for reading and writing. These literacy requirements are actually inventions and skills that humans need to be taught. Our brains are not naturally wired to do this. So strong instructional practices are required to build these neural pathways in the brain that are needed for proficient reading and writing. So the first model I'm going to draw your attention to is called the simple view of reading. While this could be interpreted as a misnomer when taken at face value, the multiplication equation identifies the two major factors, printed word recognition and language comprehension, that are required for the outcome or product of proficient reading. The simple view is represented as a product to illustrate that if either factor is less than 1, the result is less than proficient reading. So I don't do a lot of math these days, but I will tell you that I do remember 1 times 1 is 1, right? So if either of these factors is not 1, then we don't get the desired outcome that we want, which is proficient reading. So moving to my other theoretical model, printed word recognition and language comprehension are further explained through Scarborough's reading rope. Here we see that skilled reading is the result of the fluent execution of word recognition combined with text comprehension. The subtasks related to the development of word recognition skills are phonological awareness, decoding, and sight recognition. These skills are tightly braided together and are considered the on-ramp of reading proficiency, as without them, access to printed text is difficult due to lack of fluency or automatic word recognition. Language comprehension, which is the top part of the rope you see in purple, is comprised of text comprehension-related factors that include background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, which is that sentence-level comprehension, verbal reasoning, which is inferring language, and literacy knowledge, which is knowledge of how print works, genre types, and text structures. So using these theoretical models, along with others, to synthesize decades worth of research across multiple disciplines, we continue to review and update our instructional model to ensure that all student needs are being met using effective practices rooted in research. While previous instructional models have always included some aspects of these 5 pillars of early literacy displayed here on the screen, our current model explicitly and systematically teaches phonemic awareness and phonics, which are the key underpinnings of proficient reading. Our model also includes explicit vocabulary instruction provided during whole group and small group reading lessons. Significant updates were made to the VBCPS small group instruction website to support the teachers in implementation of this explicit and systematic instructional sequence. What's lovingly now known as our sequence of instruction includes support for teachers on how to introduce a pattern by activating phonemic awareness, explicitly teaching the phonics pattern or spelling pattern using phoneme-grapheme mapping, which is where we match the sound to the pattern, and then support for how to provide application practice for students in both reading and writing. These changes are also reflected in the small group learning plan templates available for teachers. Resources for use in both whole group and small group instruction were purchased to support the implementation of our changes. Information about these new resources, including the Heggerty Phonemic Awareness Curriculum and the Spire Decodable Readers, were shared in board memos over the summer. So our instructional model is driven by standards and objectives, which are aligned to the VDOE's English SOLs. The state curriculum framework underwent recent revision, and I kind of use that term loosely because we know it takes cycles. So the 2017 English Standards of Learning were fully implemented in the 2019-2020 school year. These updated standards are reflective of a stronger alignment to the science of reading research and represent the knowledge, skills, and abilities that our students need to be future ready. The overarching strands of communication and multimodal literacy, which includes media literacy, reading, writing, and research, guide the planning, teaching, assessing, and responding within our Virginia Beach City Public Schools teaching and learning framework. Instruction in these areas is delivered using data-driven, differentiated whole group instruction. Small groups are used to provide targeted, explicit, and systematic instruction aligned to specific student needs in foundational literacy skills, which we call our small group objectives, and also reading comprehension. Individual conferences are used to support reading and writing as well. and data is collected through all instructional settings, and teachers respond to student needs through intervention and acceleration. Assessment plays a key role in responding to the needs of our readers. The PALS assessment was given to all K-3 students in the fall, and this screening tool serves a dual purpose. It provides initial data on all students to guide teachers in planning for instruction at the start of the school year, and it also determines who is eligible to receive additional intervention services through the EIRI, or Early Intervention Reading Initiative grant. This year, we used the PALS mid-year progress monitoring tasks to make specific instructional updates and plan for intervention, remediation, and acceleration. The Department of Teaching and Learning supported building administrators and building literacy leaders or instructional coaches in analyzing this mid-year data to determine next steps for grade levels, classes, and in some instances, even individual students. This school-level data also drove progress monitoring at our school support planning meetings led by the Department of School Leadership. The PALS assessment will be administered to all K-2 students this spring. We don't administer it in third grade because the state says that the SOL serves in its place. And this data will help plan for the 21-22 school year. It will help us measure growth over the current school year, and it will continue to determine who is eligible to receive those additional interventions. We also use this data to inform decisions regarding the allocation of resources, the placement of instructional coaches, intervention resources, and selection of schools for programming purposes, such as summer learning campsites. The reading inventory, or RI, provides data on a student's Lexile level, which informs reading proficiency and also supports teachers in planning appropriate differentiated small group instruction. Here you see that in grades 3 through 5, we administered the assessment in fall, mid-year, and spring. This year, for the first time, second graders took the RI at mid-year, and they will again in the spring, with the goal of having stronger RI data in third grade, and to be able to maybe cross-reference our RI data in second grade with trend data for PALS in second and third grade. Each of these assessments serves an important purpose. However, at the heart of literacy instruction is that daily formative assessment collected by teachers. So anecdotal data collected during both small group and whole group instruction is key. The time that we spend working with students in small groups, providing that targeted instruction and aligned feedback is pivotal. This ongoing feedback loop, which is represented by the RESPOND portion of our teaching and learning framework, is critical to purposeful and intentional planning, teaching, and assessment practices. Finally, because reading is a science, effective professional learning and curriculum support has been a major component of our work over the last couple of years. We have worked to build collective efficacy of our literacy leaders, our building and central office administrators, and most importantly, our classroom teachers. These efforts have been ongoing, and what's displayed here on the screen is just a small sampling of some of our more recent professional learning opportunities. We are extremely grateful to have been able to offer letters, professional learning, to 130 participants, including literacy leaders, Title I classroom teachers, and central support staff. To support, we also engaged 80 administrators in Letters for Admin, professional learning. Letters professional development sessions have been extremely well received from all participants, and we look forward to continuing them next year. We intentionally started with our building coaches this year so that they could work alongside teachers to build that collective capacity. Last summer, our essential courses for K-5 classroom and special education teachers were heavily devoted to those theoretical models that I shared with you, and in building awareness of the science of reading. We've also offered a lot of asynchronous courses in Schoology on high-interest topics such as text selection, using decodable readers, and a nuts and bolts course on the science of reading. We have even worked with buildings to train non-instructional staff on evidence-based tutoring resources. We recognize that teachers have the greatest impact on the success of our readers, and we remain committed to ensuring that teachers have the knowledge and tools needed to effectively respond to student needs. Thank you for your ongoing support. This concludes my overview and update of K-5 literacy.
All right, colleagues, questions or comments? Mrs. Franklin.
you. Thank you for all you do. I do have a couple comments and questions, actually, because one of the interests that I had coming onto school board was to create a program where we can either do it with Parks and Rec, the Virginia Beach Library. I actually have some volunteers very interested in just getting out to the community and reading to the kids that need some extra help. Do you have any interesting books or any kind of thought on what would be helpful to the students? I imagine that it probably needs to be interesting so that they continue to come back and want to read. Right. But I also imagine that there's a theory in terms of, you don't just want to read junk. You want to read things that are helpful. So is there a list of books that might be available, or?
I think that's definitely something that we can collaborate on. We probably want to get a little more information about grade levels that we're looking to serve. I think you hit the nail on the head with student interest really driving and being such a significant motivator. But then we can kind of marry that with the desire to expose students to a wide variety of different genres and types of literature, because sometimes you don't know what you like until you have the opportunity to be exposed to it, right?
In my thinking, you would kind of have, okay, these weeks we're reading this book, and we're, and I imagine that it would be anything that we start from, maybe something very basic, to, where we can start, because I think really the engagement and having kids reading in general is just helpful, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, so I would think that, if we could just get this started with, any kind of books that would just be maybe somewhat basic, and then go from there, and then we can move on to maybe the next book and the next book, so, and have a series throughout the summer. I just feel like that would help to encourage kids reading throughout the summer that might not have an opportunity.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'd be interested in your thoughts.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Probably worth pointing out, we do a couple of things too, if folks are interested. So a reminder, we've got a Grow Smart program in Virginia Beach, and they do have reading. Folks who volunteer come in and do reading in our schools, and so they can certainly get connected through that. And
I'm sorry, what is that called again?
Called Grow Smart.
Grow Smart?
Yep. And it's that's with the city, but it's a partnership with the school division, and I just know because we've celebrated some of the wonderful volunteers over time who work with them and come into our schools and read. And the other thing is many of our schools do whole book reading. And so that's another sort of along the lines of what you're talking about. And so I think, in that collaborative conversation, we could certainly talk about what that looks like, and if folks are reading at home or volunteering to read with other students, if they would be aware of the whole book reading that's occurring in the schools. It doesn't happen in every school, but it happens in an awful lot of our elementary schools, for example.
Right, and I imagine we could probably do something like that in a Zoom capacity as well, and just
certainly this year
having reading groups and that sort of thing. Is that something that continues throughout the summer, having like a reading group type of thing for the kids?
So we have multiple schools that are participating in our summer learning camps. And so there's opportunities with that. There's other kind of community partnerships that we have. The Grow Smart one, I know we were recognized for as a school division for partnering with the city and having such deep involvement. So some of that's going to vary too by particular school.
Okay. I'll probably reach out to all of you then. Thank you.
All right, Mrs. Melnick.
Well, you certainly painted a picture of how intense teaching is and how much work goes into every single day in a classroom.
Absolutely.
And when you apply the science of reading, it makes you acutely aware of how important early childhood education is. And so I applaud this division and their commitment to our youngest learners. And I just want to say, as a former first grade teacher, it's not like it was when I started in 1990. How we have grown and developed, and what we do every day is truly amazing. So thank you. Thank you for what you do, and a shout out to our elementary teachers.
Absolutely. Thanks. And particular first grade teachers. I always
particularly.
It's like teaching college. You have such diverse needs that you have to meet, and our teachers do an amazing job.
But all of this now, what used to start in first grade is now starting in preschool, and so it's just remarkable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mrs. Weems.
Thank you, and definitely it is a science. You said you didn't like math and science, but reading is a science. I was talking to one of our first grade teachers the other day, and our conversation was on digraphs and blends.
Yes.
So that's,
Yes.
and,
One sounder too.
yeah. So, but we were talking, and I wanted to ask you this: have we gone? And from our conversation, this is what I took from it: that have we gone back to more phonics now as of late? Because the kids that I'm talking to and interacting with, and they're all first graders, they have got that phonics down so well. And this teacher just kind of made the reference of, you know, Carolyn, we've really gone back to like phonics. So when did that change? And I know stuff like this changes, like our math changes. We go back to old school math, and then we come up with all these grids and different things. Then we go back and all that. So is that what's kind of happening here, or?
So thank you. Great question. First, I'm smiling as you're talking about the teacher and the phonics patterns that these students have under their belt. That's amazing. And I think the idea of going back may depend on when you started and what your knowledge base is. So I think for some of our more experienced teachers, it does feel like we are maybe moving to something that they had previously been taught, or maybe even experienced themselves as they were kind of coming through their schooling. For some of our teachers that are newer to the profession, it may not feel like a going back as much of a maybe I'm building a new skill set and truly understanding how to do this explicit instruction. But really what the research has shown is that you have to have that solid alphabetic principle, which is those phonics patterns. And successful readers all have that. We have a lot more too, but that's kind of that foundation. So yes, in some instances, it may feel like we're revisiting or putting a greater emphasis on something that we haven't in years past. But for some of us, it's new, and there's a learning curve that comes with it. So I think it depends maybe to some degree on your own level of experience.
Well, hopefully we'll see positive results because of it. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Sure.
It is fascinating to
You
look
could
at
tell
all
I
this
could
stuff.
talk about it all day.
I know. You could talk about it forever. I know. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay, ready for you, Mrs. Anderson.
Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about teacher preparation as lesson plan preparation. And so I realized that our team in the administration part has done a lot to put things online so that teachers can access some important and very enlightening lessons. But they still have to go through Schoology in the elementary level, correct? To get to these things, is that correct?
Are you referring to teachers or students?
Teachers, when they're making their lesson plans. So my point is, elementary teachers in particular usually have, when it comes to language arts groups, for example, they in a typical elementary classroom, anywhere from 4 to 5 groups that they have to make lesson plans for. And so what I want to know is, what have you done as a team to help teachers be able to access plans so that they can make their life a little bit easier? You know, not only do you have 4 to 5 groups in language arts, you also have 3 or 4 groups for math groups as well. So in other words, and that's not whole group, that's not including the whole group instruction planning. So what can we do to help teachers be able to access those lessons that are provided? Because many of those lessons are provided through Schoology, and they just click on them, and I realize that. But what can we do to make them more student ready? Is there any thought to that to help our teachers be able to develop those plans in a more succinct manner?
So a couple of things on that. One, we have developed a small group instruction website that directly links out resources in what I refer to as our sequence of instruction. So teachers can determine what, based on their student data, that particular group needs. They can click into the sequence of instruction, and that's going to take them right to a folder that basically has all the resources they need to deliver that instruction. There's even a scripted kind of explicit instruction document for the teacher so that they have that support, recognizing that some of this may be new to us, and so we have that support as teachers. So that's really the work we've been doing with our building coaches, is to build that kind of muscle memory and capacity to know this is where I go, this is how I find it. And to some degree, doing it is what makes us more proficient at it. So the more we get into it, the better we are at it. I find that with my own examples, sometimes when it's a program that I don't use very often, it takes me a lot more time to navigate it because I'm not in it very often. So we really have worked with our building coaches and our administrators to build that kind of understanding of how to find the resources, so that if I'm not there to support or the coach isn't, the teacher does feel successful in navigating and finding what they need. And then we have some linked out student resources as well within that folder. So that's just kind of an example. I think it's really just leveraging what we have and getting comfortable and feeling that we're able to get to it and we know how to use it and find it and push it out to students if appropriate.
Okay, so you're suggesting that over time, as they become more familiar with it, it may become easier. Is that what you're suggesting?
I think that's a big part of it. We feel confident that we have what's needed, and so we will continue to support buildings in accessing what's there so that teachers feel successful.
Right. So I realize that, like even within a building, there may be maybe 4 or 5 first grade teachers or 4 or 5 second grade teachers. Is there any way that they can share lesson plans within their group? I mean, are they already doing that?
I believe at the building level, there are lots of different mechanisms that are in place for sharing, and some of that's provided with the guidance of the building administrators. We have a lot of different kind of technological receptacles that they can use to share, whether it's, over Google or in a different Schoology group. So I do believe that there are opportunities to share across and among grade levels.
Okay, thank you.
To follow up with any more questions, and we'll get to our next session. But such an important topic, and thank you so much. And please, to all, as you come upon your teachers, convey to them from us how much we appreciate their work.
Well,
thank you.
We appreciate your support.
So we are welcoming Dr. Robertson, our Chief of Schools, with graduation updates.
So I'll wait for Regina. Yeah, good afternoon, Chairwoman Rye, Vice Chair Melnick, members of the board, and Dr. Spence. The purpose of the presentation this afternoon is to share plans for the class of 2021 commencement ceremonies, as well as to share information related to other end-of-year activities of interest to the board and the community. As noted here on the agenda, our presentation focuses on 2 main areas: graduation plans, and again, other important end-of-year school events. As I shared 2 weeks ago, we had recently had discussions with Live Nation, the managing partner for the Veterans United Home Loans Amphitheater, about hosting our 2021 graduation ceremonies. At the time, we were waiting on approval, and we have now received this approval from Live Nation. Prior to this option possibility, schools have been developing plans to host multiple smaller graduation ceremonies over several days, similar to what they did last year. As you can see on the screen, each option has its strengths and challenges. And it is important to note that no perfect option exists. So as you can see, the strengths of option 1 at the Veterans United Home Loans Amphitheater, the strengths are that the entire senior class will graduate as a single group in one ceremony. The challenges are it'll be a reduced number of guest tickets because we're still going to have to rely on and abide by the seating capacity requirements as defined in the governor's executive order. The second option is individual homeschool ceremonies. Again, there are strengths and challenges of both. The strengths of the homeschool ceremonies, you can have up to 10 tickets per graduate. The challenges are it is multiple smaller ceremonies spread over 3 to 4 days. I would say last year that school administrators probably spent about 80 hours over a 1-week period hosting all those graduations. Upon receiving this information, schools decided to share these 2 options with seniors to determine if they preferred one option over the other. And so that information was shared last week. The results were 9 high schools overwhelmingly favored the amphitheater option. 2 high schools were slightly in favor of hosting at their home school, and 1 high school heavily favored hosting at their home school. Our goal has always been to provide the same option for all schools, and thus the following decision was made and will be communicated to students and families beginning with this presentation. As you can see on this slide, all 11 of our traditional high schools and Green Run Collegiate are planning to graduate at the amphitheater. I say planning because we are in the contract process. And although we do not anticipate any issues with that contract, it would be premature to declare this as final. As noted on the previous slide, the strength of this option is our seniors will graduate together as one class. This option is not without challenges, as determining seating capacity based on the latest edition of the governor's executive order will result in each graduate receiving between 2 and 4 tickets for guests. We recognize this could present a challenge for some families, but we will use live streaming to broadcast the entire ceremony so that those who cannot secure a ticket can watch the ceremony in real time. Now, one may ask, the amphitheater can hold 20,000 patrons for concerts, so how is it our graduates can only get 2 to 4 tickets? Well, we will only be using the seating area under the canopy, which holds approximately 7,000 attendees. As we all know, June is hot and humid, and expecting guests to sit in the sun on the lawn is not something we feel is a good idea for attendees or staff. When factoring in physical distancing requirements between parties and no more than 50% for outdoor events, we are predicting somewhere around 2,000 available seats, which again, depending on the size of the graduating class, is going to equate to somewhere between 2 and 4 tickets. Renaissance Academy, due to a much smaller class size, has asked and received approval to graduate at the Renaissance Academy. Here's the graduation schedule for the class of 2021. You will note we are reserving Saturday, June 19th as our rainout date, as each year we have had at least one night with severe weather, and we do not want our students, staff, or families to be subjected to an outside ceremony during an inclement weather event. This schedule is very similar to the rotation that was planned for pre-pandemic. I wanted to take a moment to share some more information on some other key end-of-year events of interest. Elementary and middle school will be having some version of a 5th and 8th grade promotion ceremony to recognize this special group of students. Parents of these students can expect more information on plans from their individual schools very soon. Kindergarten registration is underway, and elementary schools have been very creative in planning for this process. This includes individual and small group in-person sessions as an option, as well as a fully virtual option with a wealth of information parents can find on each school's website. Unfortunately, at the high school level, we have to cancel proms this year as our health and safety requirements have not provided any option to host this special occasion. However, schools have been planning for senior day activities, and parents can contact the school student activities coordinator for more information about individual school plans. Recently, updated health and safety requirements for our fine arts programming have resulted in changes to some of our daily practices. This includes the time for air exchange between practice time, allowances for indoor performance with spectators, and adjustments to band, orchestra, chorus, and theater practices and performances. We look forward to these students and their families being able to enjoy a live performance, whether indoors or outdoors, this spring. And then finally, updated guidance from the governor's order has also allowed playground equipment to be used at the elementary school level. At this time, I'm available to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, Mrs. Anderson and then Mrs. Frank.
Franklin? Okay, I hate to just continue to further this discussion, but we've had so many parents plead with us about the prom situation. I guess I would just be curious about how normally how many people would be attending prom? Where is the limitation in regards to? I mean, if we restricted it to the first, 100 people that signed up, or I'm just curious if there's any possibility that there is any way that we could have some sort of event like that at all.
So just for everyone's information, the prom planning process starts early in the school year. Dates are secured as early as September, October for the May, June time period. There are several locations within our city that can accommodate the numbers for a prom. Typically, a prom will have somewhere between 300 and 500 attendees. Even if you limited the number of attendees, the issue still remains physical distancing between parties. It's difficult to go to a prom and not dance with your date.
I know.
It would be difficult to go to a prom and have some type of, because you always feed the students at the prom. It would require a sit-down meal at 6 feet apart. And the costs that go with a sit-down meal versus a buffet. There were way too many moving parts to be able for any of the schools to feel comfortable trying to work around the physical distancing requirements and health and safety mitigations.
Okay. I was just wondering if there's, because the way that they're talking, I mean, if they could have any kind of event together, just one last event. It doesn't sound like they're looking for it to be spectacular. They just
there are some last events that are occurring. So after graduation, we're still having all-night grad events.
Oh, okay.
And so those are going to be at various venues. A little easier to arrange for physical distancing and health and safety mitigations in that type of venue than a prom venue where, young ladies will spend $500 on a dress and young men will rent a tuxedo for a couple $100.
Yeah.
All night grad is pretty much paid for, and they can kind of show up and
I know. I was the treasurer for all night grad.
Right. So it was a difficult decision, but it's pretty common across the country.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Mrs. Felton, then Mrs. Hughes.
Thank you, Chair Wright. I see here you have live streaming here for graduation. Will it look like or how we did the art exhibit where we sit in the cars and we saw the art exhibit? Will it be something like that, or can you explain on how the live streaming will be? Because that was excellent. When you did the art exhibit, it was wonderful.
Yeah, so the difference is you were able to pull up right in front of the art exhibit.
True. And
see it. At the amphitheater, if you've ever been to the amphitheater, the parking lot's a long way from the actual stage. And the large screens at the stage are really only viewable about halfway up the hill on the lawn. So that wouldn't be possible. What would be possible is for you to sit in the comfort of your own living room and watch the live stream. VBTV is going to help us out like they've done every year.
Well, I will say that was very innovative what you did with the art exhibit, because I had no idea this had a drive-through. But when we got there, we all sit in the cars and just saw everything on screen. Had 2 screens. It was excellent. So
that credit goes to the Department of Teaching and Learning, the Department of Communications and Community Engagement.
It was awesome. It was fantastic. I would engage in that type of setting again for anything you put on. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Mrs. Hughes.
Just out of curiosity, what is the largest graduating class that we have?
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I would say roughly 450. Normally it's a little larger than 500, but we did have students who, based on the 4x4 option, were able to graduate in January. But we're going to allow those students to come back, should they choose, and walk with us. So we could have Lansdowne, Ocean Lakes at a little over 500, but most of the graduating classes are around 400 to 450.
Okay. I was just looking at the seating. I was just working some numbers, just trying. Roughly, and just one other number, roughly how much staff is there? Because I imagine that figures into the capacity.
So interesting, we're talking about staff because normally 100% of your staff will attend graduation. So we are engaging with the principals right now to determine, is there a number where we would limit the staff to open more seats for parents and families? There's a certain number of staff we need to help with the event, but it might be that and this is not decided, staff, if you're listening, this is the discussion. We are looking at asking staff to allow us to limit their attendance this year so that we can maximize the seats available for guests.
Roughly, what is that figure normally, though?
How many staff attend? Over 100.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, so I'm sure there were many families awaiting this news, and I'm sure if they have questions, that we will hear from them. But thank you for you know, the effort the last 2 weeks, the discussions that I suspect that all went into this. So
yes,
appreciate
ma'am.
it.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So with that, we are our workshop is adjourned, and we will reconvene for our formal meeting at 6 o'clock.